This morning, Secretary Austin departed for Ramstein Air Base in Germany to host the 24th meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which convenes tomorrow, September 6th. At Ramstein, Secretary Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, will bring together ministers of defense and senior military officials from some 50 nations to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs to defend its people from Russian aggression. Some key focus areas of this UDCG will include bolstering Ukraine's air defense capabilities, updates on the UDCG's capability coalitions, to include the Air Force Coalition, and the energizing of the defense industrial bases of coalition nations to enable support to Ukraine for the long haul. As Secretary Austin has said, Ukraine matters to U.S. and international security, and the efforts of the UDCG continue to play a vital role in Ukraine's fight for freedom and their sovereignty. Turning to our humanitarian efforts in Gaza, the MV Cape Trinity completed its offload of approximately 6 million pounds of humanitarian aid in Ashdod. Over the next couple days, the Cape Trinity will prepare for its trip back to the port of Beaumont in Texas. The 6 million pounds of aid delivered this week brings the total aid delivered to the people of Gaza through the maritime and air corridors to more than 38 million pounds. This effort represents the highest volume of humanitarian assistance the U.S. military has ever delivered in the Middle East. Switching gears, yesterday, Secretary Austin spoke by phone to his Philippine counterpart, Secretary of National Defense Teodoro. The two leaders discussed U.S.-Philippine defense ties following the productive U.S.-Philippines 2+2 ministerial dialogue in July. Secretary Austin also reaffirmed the ironclad U.S. commitment to the Philippines following recent dangerous and escalatory actions by the People's Republic of China against lawful Philippine maritime operations in the South China Sea. Both officials discussed the importance of preserving the rights of all nations to fly, sail, and operate safely and responsibly wherever international law allows. And a readout of the call has been posted to defense.gov. And finally, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the recent and untimely passing of Tom Scutieri, a former member of the Pentagon Press Corps family and a dedicated journalist. Press colleagues will remember him for his birthday wishes, breakfast and lunchtime morsels, and press briefing bingo. On behalf of the Department of Defense and OSD Public Affairs, I'd like to extend our deepest condolences to his family and his 2 children, his friends, his press colleagues, and his loved ones. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. I believe we have AP joining us via phone, so I'll start with Lita Baldor. AP.
Thanks, Sabrina. Question on Secretary Del Toro. The Office of Special Counsel has found that he violated the Hatch Act. Does the Secretary or do you all have a comment on that, particularly since the Secretary has often talked about U.S., about how troops should not get involved in politics? And then secondly, do you have an update on the sailor that's been detained in Venezuela? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Lita. I'll take your first questions first. So in terms of the Office of Special Counsel report that you just referenced, we just were made aware of the report, so it's currently being reviewed. But what I can say on this issue, or broadly speaking, is earlier this year, Deputy Secretary Hicks signed out a memo that was sent to senior leadership in the department, and it stressed the importance of complying with federal law and DoD policy that addresses participation when it comes to the political process by DoD military and civilian personnel. And in the memo, it talks about the right and the right to exercise our right to vote and participate in government, but it also highlights that as public servants, we uphold DoD's longstanding tradition of remaining apolitical as we carry out our responsibilities. And so just to emphasize on that, it's important that we maintain the trust and confidence of the American people, which requires us to avoid any action that could imply the support of any political party, candidate, or campaign. So I'll leave it at that. In terms of your second question on the U.S. sailor in Venezuela, I don't have more other than to confirm that a U.S. sailor was detained in Venezuela around August 30th by Venezuelan enforcement authorities while on personal travel. The U.S. Navy is looking into this. We're working with the State Department, but at this time, I just don't have more for you. All right, I'll come back in the room here. Idris.
Do you have an update on how many forces are currently in the Middle East? I know there's 40,000 or so.
Yeah.
And just following on to that, how long do you think you can keep the additional squadron that was sent there sort of in an efficient and sustainable manner? Is that something you just plan on having there for the foreseeable future, or is there an end date sort of thing?
So in terms of the actual numbers, I don't have more to provide than the 40,000 that I think we had provided maybe a week or two ago. In terms of any force posture movements, I don't have anything to announce at this time. But as you know, and as General Ryder, I think, briefed a few weeks ago, the TR was extended. Eventually, as we do with all carriers or rotations, there will be, she will eventually leave the AOR. But nothing to announce at this time. There's still 2 carriers that remain in the Central Command area of responsibility. And of course, we have the ARGMU in the Eastern Med, along with a company of destroyers as well.
And just switching topics,
Sure.
The ship that's on fire that was attacked by the Houthis, is there any plan for the U.S. military to help salvage it, given that I know you've talked about sort of the potential environmental disaster if the oil that it's carrying starts leaking?
So my understanding is that you're referring to the MV Soyunion that's still on fire. So for an update, she still sits completely immobilized within the Red Sea, still posing an environmental, potentially catastrophic environmental disaster and a navigational hazard. She still remains on fire. My understanding is that the company of the Soyunion has contracted tugboats to go out there and to conduct, fire operations and to try and salvage the vessel itself. Those efforts have not been successful, mainly because of the security environment. The Houthis continue to fire, missiles, drones towards shipping in the Red Sea, and they have threatened tugboats that went out for salvage opportunities. They have threatened them, so they did have to turn away. So right now, the ship still remains on fire. There have been no recovery successful attempts yet. The U.S. Navy is standing by to assist, but right now I'm told that this is being done through private means. Janie.
Thank you, Sabrina. 2 questions
Sure.
on Ukraine and South Korea.
Okay.
Ukraine President Zelensky said that if the United States authorized the use of long-range missiles, Ukraine could easily defeat Russia. So why is the United States reluctant to allow Ukraine to use long-range weapons?
So thanks, Janie, for the question. Our intelligence assesses that 90% of Russian aircraft launching the glide bombs and the firing missiles against Ukraine are at airfields that are 300 kilometers away from Ukrainian-controlled territory. So these airfields now puts that out of ATACMS range. So ATACMS would not be able to reach these airfields. So therefore, the challenges posed by these glide bombs, would still remain. And even if Ukraine, were to use ATACMS against the very small percentage of the airfields that remain in range, we've seen the Russian military move those airfields back. So again, the impact would be very little and of very little strategic value. And you had another question?
Yeah, thank you. And does the United States still want South Korea to provide additional weapons, including 155 millimeter artillery cell?
I think we've been very clear with all partners and allies all around the world willing and able to provide military assistance to Ukraine, including 155 millimeter rounds that we know they desperately need to help Ukraine in their fight. I won't speak for other nations and what they're providing, but as I mentioned at the top, there is a UDCG tomorrow. Air defense is one of the many topics that is going to come up at that UDCG. We know a priority for Ukraine is those 155 millimeter rounds. So whatever other nations can provide would certainly be welcome to Ukraine. I'm going to go to the phones and then come back in the room. Jeff Schogel, Task and Purpose.
Thank you. There's been a lot of information recently about Russian influence operations. I was just checking, has Kevin Costner been in the Pentagon recently?
You know, Jeff, not to my knowledge. Next question goes to Carla Babb, VOA.
Hey, thanks for doing this. That's a great question to follow. I want to go back to Ukraine. At the current pace that the U.S. is providing Ukraine aid under the PDA, it looks like about $6 billion in authority is going to expire unused at the end of this month, FY 2024. Could you give us some more clarity about what's going to happen to that money after September? And is there any intention to extend that authority or to ask Congress to extend that authority so that Ukraine can continue receiving PDA packages?
Thanks, Carla, for the question. So as you know, we worked very hard with Congress to secure that supplemental and to allocate that money for Ukraine for these PDA packages and USAIs. I don't have anything to preview on, what that means for the rest of the amounts that are left. What I can tell you is you've seen us do this almost on a weekly basis. We continue to roll out and announce presidential drawdown packages that vary in size, but we continue to do that on a consistent basis. I have no doubt that we are going to use everything we can that's available to us to make sure that we are continuing to provide Ukraine what it needs, both in the short term and the long term. The president has said it before, the secretary has said it, and you'll hear him say it again. We're in this fight with Ukraine for the long haul. We are standing with them for what they need on the battlefield, both in the long and short term. So you're going to see us make use of those funds in any way possible. I'll take one more from the phone, and then I'm happy to come back in the room. Heather, USNI.
Thanks so much. With the Houthis in the Red Sea, are you guys noticing any kind of uptick? It seemed like they were quiet for a little bit, and then now they're attacking multiple tankers. Is there any anything that you can say about what might have been causing this most recent uptick?
Thanks, Heather. So we've seen this pattern sort of happen over the last few months or since the attack started. There is a series of waves, then there's a pause, then there are waves again. I can't speak to the strategy behind that. I can only speak to what we as the United States military are doing with our partners and allies. And of course, you're very familiar with Operation Prosperity Guardian and the fact that we continue to ensure that those shipping lanes remain open, to ensure that freedom of navigation can occur in the Red Sea. But you're seeing what the Houthis are doing on a day-to-day basis. They've set on fire a oil tanker carrying 1 million barrels of crude oil. I don't need to explain to you what type of damage that could cause to an environment like the Red Sea. You're talking major ecological systems that could be destroyed. So while I can't speak to their tactics, I can speak to the fact that they're causing environmental and economical disasters right in their backyard. Leave it at that. Yeah.
I think this is Sabrina. In light of Middle East tensions, does the Pentagon support a United Nations-led military peacekeeping force in Gaza, West Bank, and throughout Israel? And have a follow-up.
So I don't have anything for you on that. The president has been pretty clear that there will not be U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza. But in terms of, the ceasefire deal, that's something that the United States is working very closely on with our partners and allies in the region. That would include some type of, peacekeeping force, but I don't anticipate that would include U.S. military boots on the ground.
Well, in light of Hamas using the Philadelphia corridor in Gaza to smuggle in weapons and potentially smuggle out Israeli hostages into the Sinai Desert, it's according to Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu, what is the Pentagon's perspective on the strategic military significance of the Philadelphia corridor?
I think you just mentioned some of the strategic significance of the Philadelphia corridor, but I'd really refer you to the Israelis to speak to that. we know that there are tunnels under that corridor, but ultimately what we want to see here is a ceasefire deal put into place that allows hostages to come home to their families. It's almost been a year now. But I'd refer you to the Israelis to speak more to the significance of that. Fadi.
That knowledge of the existence of tunnels underneath Philadelphia corridor, the Egyptians deny the existence of these tunnels. Can you share more about what you know about these tunnels?
I don't have more to provide other than what, is I mean, I'm not going to be able to do it, unfortunately, an intel assessment from here. I would say, broadly speaking, we know that there are tunnels on that border and in that corridor that have allowed in the past, a movement of weapons shipments into Gaza. Again, what we want to see and what we are focused on, as you know, is bringing home and making sure that we can get into place a ceasefire deal that also allows the hostages to return home.
You said broadly, is this based on recent intelligence or Israeli, sharing information?
Yeah, I wish I could get into more specifics. I just won't be able to get into that from here, but I'm just gonna have to leave it at that.
I'm not asking about the type of intelligence,
Yeah.
but when you make such a claim that there are tunnels underneath the Philadelphia corridor, while Egypt is denying that, I think some explanation is warranted here.
Appreciate the question, Fadi, but I'm just not going to have more. I'd have to refer you to the Egyptians and the Israelis to speak more to that. What I can tell you is what we've seen in the past, but I'm just not going to be able to get into any more details from here.
Can you define when was the last time you?
Yeah, unfortunately, Fadi, I know this is not going to be a satisfactory answer for you. I'm just not going to be able to provide more specifics. Yeah, Matt.
Thanks, Sabrina. Going back to American restrictions on Ukraine's weapon usage. You say that the prime targets inside Russia are outside the range of ATACMS.
Yeah.
So then what's the purpose of these restrictions being in place? Is this to, protect the Ukrainians from themselves, you think they would otherwise squander, their limited ATACMS? Or is it a fear of escalation, or can you explain what the thinking is there?
Yeah, Matt, I think it's a little bit of all of those things. I think the Ukrainians, in terms of their own decision making, they have proven themselves on the battlefield just from at the very beginning of the war. I think there were many people reporting at the time that Kyiv was destined to fall within days, and then it was weeks later, months later, and now we're talking many years into this war. We've seen the prowess of the Ukrainian military on the battlefield. So they certainly know how to make their own decisions when it comes to employing these types of weapons and munitions on the battlefield. There is a limited number of ATACMS. It is not there is not an abundance of these long range type of capabilities. And of course, one thing that we're always assessing is escalation, and that's something that we've been very clear about from the beginning. So it's a bit of all of those things knitted together, but they have been very successful in using these ATACMS to take back their territory in the south and the east. And we believe that they have the capabilities and being able to knit those together on the battlefield. They do have a really significant challenge in the east, and being able to direct some of the firepower that they have that direction is what we continue to work with them on.
Will the idea of loosening restrictions possibly come up in tomorrow's contact group talks?
I can't predict the future. I'm sure, there's been a lot of conversations about that, but right now there's no change to U.S. policy. Yeah, Noah.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but the posture changes from Russia to move its assets for glide bombs beyond the 300-kilometer range, was that made after May when the initial restrictions were loosened for Ukraine from the U.S.? When did that occur?
I don't know when they started moving that, but all I can tell you is that we know that there have been airfields positioned outside of the ATACMS range.
And then secondarily, on the delivery of the last 6 million pounds of aid, does that then mean that the remaining JLOTS personnel who were there in the region will now be heading directly home, or are they still waiting on other parts of the mission?
To my knowledge, the only remaining part and component of the JLOTS was that Cape Trinity, so they will be heading home. I'm not tracking that there are any other remaining parts or pieces associated with JLOTS, or personnel, I should say, associated with JLOTS still left in the region. Yeah, yes, in the back.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. On 2nd of September, two U.S. Security personnel were attacked by a group of 15 people in Izmir, Turkey. Those people belonged to Nationalist Party of Turkey. How concerning is this for the United States, such exposure of U.S. military personnel to such kind of nationalist group in terms of security of the U.S. security persons abroad?
So I don't have much more to add than to what General Ryder spoke to earlier this week. I think it showed tremendous professionalism on the part of our Marines that were attacked there. We fully support the local police looking into this incident. I believe the Naval Criminal Investigative Services are also cooperating with local authorities on this incident. So we're happy that everyone is safe, that everyone is back on that MU, on the ARG-MU. But again, I just don't have more to add as it's an ongoing investigation with local authorities. Great. Yes, in the back.
A quick question on first Armenian American military drills that were held recently in Armenia, Eagle Partner 2024. I was wondering if you have any comments on these drills and in a more broader context about the current stage of military cooperation with the country of Armenia or the perspectives.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of the drill, so I don't have anything to offer on this one. Constantine. I would refer you to the COCOM. I just don't have anything more to add. Constantine.
Thanks, Sabrina. Going back to the sailor in Venezuela, so the last time a U.S. service member was sort of detained or connected with Venezuela was Jordan Goudreau, who was a special forces operator looking to basically lead a small coup. Are there any concerns that this sailor being detained is part of something more significant, deeper?
I'm not going to speculate, but I don't think so. That being said, I have very little details as this sailor was on personal travel to Venezuela. This wasn't something that was authorized. And as you know, the State Department recommends against traveling there. So, the U.S. Navy working closely with the State Department, I have very little details on this incident. Of course, we'd like to see the sailor returned home, but again, I'd refer you to the State Department for any further questions, and of course, don't want to go down the rabbit hole of speculating. Yeah. Yes, we'll go in this row.
Yeah. I have a question about if you can talk a little bit more about the presence of the U.S. militaries off the coast of Israel. The two ships and if the submarine is still there. And if you can talk a little bit more about the presence of the military and if there is some sort of coordination with some European forces to support the U.S. in case of escalation. And then I have a second question about Ukraine.
Okay. So nothing has changed in our force posture in the Eastern Mediterranean. The USS Georgia is still in the EUCOM area of responsibility. We still have our destroyers. We still have the ARG-MU that's there. It's, I would say, still sending a very strong message of deterrence in the region. And also, should Israel come under attack, that's what that force posture is there to do, is to help defend Israel if they were to be attacked like they were on April 13th. But I don't have any changes to announce for our force posture.
Are you guys asking for any support from let's say, the Italian, Southern European forces?
What do you mean by
forces?
Support?
Like to support the American ships and having like European militaries also in the region supporting the Americans, not being only the Americans taking care of the area.
We're always working with our partners and allies in the region. It is, in the Eastern Mediterranean, so I think you would expect that there are countries with a naval presence tied to Europe that are constantly operating there. We do regular exercises with our European allies. I don't have anything to read out from here, but of course we're always coordinating with them and working with them on a daily basis.
And my second question, if you can talk a little bit more about the traveling of the secretary in Germany, about what can we expect, if you can, what's they're gonna, you probably have some information that you can share with us about what they're planning to talk, when we expect coming out from this meeting?
Well, I'm just going to have to tell you to tune in tomorrow. But look, I don't have more to really provide than what I read out at the top, which is that this is the 24th meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. We know air defenses is one of the top priorities for the Ukrainians. That's certainly something that's going to be discussed tomorrow. We know fires, so 155 millimeter rounds, also a priority for the Ukrainians. That's something that I'm sure will come up. But not going to get ahead of the secretary, but I think you can expect some of those conversations. And then, as I mentioned, there are 8 capability coalitions that have been stood up as part of the UDCG. Those capability coalitions, including the Air Coalition, is one that the United States co-leads. So that will be an opportunity to talk about other additional needs that the Ukrainians have. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. About the Middle East crisis, so what is the latest assessments of the Pentagon regarding any potential action by Iran against Israel?
Really don't have much more to provide than what we've said before, which is that we've maintained a very robust force posture in the region. We have 2 carrier strike groups, right there. Has that factored into Iran's decision-making process? I think it's certainly gotten into their headspace, but beyond that, we're maintaining our force posture there. We're there, of course, to defend our forces, and should we need to, we will come to the defense of Israel. Great. Yes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been reported from last Wednesday, some of the Arab military attaches met here in Pentagon with U.S. defense officials, specifically regarding the possible Iranian attack on Israel or something like that. But my question is regarding the U.S. possible measures or something under consideration with your Arab allies like UAE, Qatar, where you have military presence, and Saudi Arabia as well, who is very next to Yemen, as Yemenis are like calling mobilization cars each day. So you have done enough with your Saudi counterparts, Qatar and UAE, on the possible Yemenis, any type of retaliation to counter that?
So I think what you're asking is just on, if I'm understanding, and please correct me if I'm not, just asking about what is our response and how are we working with Arab partners in the region when it comes to the Houthis and how they're in Yemen. Okay, so the Houthis continue to disrupt shipping lanes within the Red Sea and the BAM. That has caused environmental, economical problems. That is not just a problem for the region, this is a global problem. This disrupts shipping for all around the world. And so when you create, to use the example of the So Union, which is carrying 1 million barrels of oil, if those fires spread to those oil barrels and those oil barrels start leaking into the Red Sea, you are going to have an ecological catastrophe. So just taking a broader step back, this isn't just a United States, Arab partners problem. This is an international problem. Because just think about, and I'm not an environmentalist, but just think about the actual environmental, economical, financial degradation that's going to happen just from that one ship, and they're doing it almost daily. So you have to, so it's not just an Arab partner, or it's not just an Arab country problem or a United States problem, it's a global problem, which is why the secretary late last year established Operation Prosperity Guardian. And Aspides is another coalition, a European coalition that is also works with Operation Prosperity Guardian and other like-minded nations that believe in upholding the freedom of navigation. So this is something that we continue to work together with many of our allies around the world, and we're going to continue to do so.
One little on Department of Justice and Department of State release about the possible interference from the Russian side and the other security threats. We have seen that from June, number of arrests being made by border security officials and some of the South and Central Asian nations. People, they've been arrested because of their strong ties with the IS. So the question is regarding the election in the US. Do you guys have some requests from Department of Homeland Security for the coordination specifically to counter these threats?
So when it comes to election security, that's something that you saw the Attorney General speak to. So I would refer you to DOJ and the State Department to really speak to how, they are monitoring election threats and handling election security. That's just not something that DOD, was part of that. And so I'd refer you to those two agencies to speak to that. Jared.
I just wanted to check if there's any update on the any clarification on this apparent strike by the Houthis on this Saudi-owned tanker, the Amjad. I know there was some conflicting information about whether or not it was hit or targeted.
I'm still tracking that the Amjad was hit, but I believe she was able to continue underway. But for more, I'd refer you to the actual company. Yes, over here and then in the back. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much. About Syria. According to the local news reports, on Monday, the PYD-YPG, or in your words, SDF, released 50 ISIS members from prison. The United States always says that it is partnering YPG-SDF to counter ISIS. But in that case, the SDF-YPG released ISIS prisoners from prison. So that's a big contradiction. So what is the reaction by Department of Defense on this matter?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there was a confusion in some of the facts, but if you're referring to what happened a few days ago, there was, what I understand, a breakout from one of the prisons, and we worked with the SDF to actually get those ISIS militants back in custody. So Central Command put out a press release on that. I'd refer you to that. Yes, in the back, and then last question. Did you not have a question? Never. I thought you did. I'm sorry. If you did not, then never. Okay.
So thanks, Sabrina.
Yeah.
This 6 million pounds of humanitarian aid that Trinity transported to the port of Ashdod, were there originally planned to be transported through the JLAT project?
If I'm remembering correctly, this was some of the aid that when the JLAT's mission had concluded, this was some of the original or remaining aid that was still in Cyprus that was loaded onto the Cape Trinity and was waiting to be downloaded in Ashdod at the appropriate time that they were able to do it. So this was not aid that I was tracking that was supposed to go over JLAT's. This was already being moved to go through the Ashdod corridor.
So since they are coming from Cyprus, I assume that they already went through the security check.
That's right.
Will they need another additional security check in Israel, or there will be transferred faster than the rest of the aid?
So we've been transferring aid through Ashdod for a bit of time, you might remember. So there's once it is checked at Cyprus, it can move through Ashdod pretty quickly. All right. Thanks, everyone.